Hello everyone, my name is Chris Hickson. This is the YouTube video on the study guide for 4th and 6th period for the math class at Miles ELC in the middle school. This video is for our second exam, which will cover 4 different topics. The first is percent of quantity, the second is tax, the third is tip, and the fourth is discount. So we'll just get right into it. But before we jump onto the first problem, I want you to notice the directions on the study guide. It says to evaluate and to round all answers to the hundredths place. Some of these answers might give you decimals that kind of go on and on. So as we go through these problems, it'll be important to remember that we're looking for answers in the hundredths place. Number 1 says, what is 15% of 45? The first thing I need to do is convert the 15% to a decimal. I do that by moving the decimal 2 places to the left. The end result, 15% becomes 0.15. Now I can take 0.15 and multiply it by 45. Because if you recall from our class notes, a percent times a part, or excuse me, a percent times the whole equals the part. So now I can do 45 times 0.15. I don't know what that is in my head, so I'll go ahead and do the work over here. Five times 5 is 25. 5 times 4 is 20. Add the other 2 and we'll have 22. Now I'll move over to the next place and multiply by the 1. Put a 0 as my placeholder. 1 times 5 is 5. And 1 times 4 is 4. I can add these up. But I'm not done here. I have to first count how many decimal places I had in my multiplication problem. There are no decimal places present in the 45, but we do have 2 present in 0.18. That means that my end result, 675, I'll have to move the decimal point over 2 times to the left. And my answer should be 6.75. Written out, my answer would say something like 6.75 is 15% of 45. Let's move on to number 2. It says, what is 12% of 142? This will be the same process as before. The first thing we need to do is take the percent and convert it to a decimal. We move the decimal point over 2 times to convert it, and 12% becomes 0.12. Now we'll take that 0.12 and multiply it by 142. Two times 2 is 4, 2 times 4 is 8, and 2 times 1 is 2. We'll go ahead and set a placeholder and move on to the next decimal. The next place value, sorry. 1 times 2 is 2, 1 times 4 is 4, and 1 times 1 is 1. I can now add these up to get my answer. I have to count how many decimal places I had in my multiplication. 142 has no decimal places in it, but 0.12 has 2. Therefore, my answer will need to have its decimal moved over to the left 2 times. The end result, my answer should be 17.04. 142 times 0.12 equals 17.04. If I decided to write my answer out, which I don't have to, but if I did, it would look something like this. 12% of 142 is 17.04. And that's it. Let's jump to number 3 now. Number 3 says, what is 60 out of 130, as a percentage? What is 60 out of 130 as a percentage? Remember in our previous lesson we talked about setting up percentages as fractions, and we recall that we talked about having the part over the whole. So we can do the same thing here. We have the part and the whole, so we can take those and divide them in order to figure out our percentage. Now we can go ahead and divide these. Button 130 goes into 600 approximately 4 times. Let's see how close I am. Here I tried to multiply by 60, but actually, I'll catch myself right now, I should be multiplying by 130 and not 60. Now 130 times 4, because 4 is our estimation. Gets us 520. That's pretty close to 600. We couldn't fit in another 130, so we'll go with that. Put the 4 there, put the 520 here, and we'll subtract. Should leave us with 80. $130 goes into 800. I would guess about 6 times. Let's see how close I am. 780 is pretty close to 800. So we'll put 6 up there, 780 down there, and we'll go ahead and subtract them. We're left with 20. So we'll add another 0 and bring it down. $130 goes into 200 only one time. 1 times 130 is 130. And when we subtract that, we'll be left with 70. So we'll add another 0, bring it all the way down. I believe that 130 can go into 700 approximately 5 times. Let's multiply and see how close I am. $650 is pretty close to 700. So we'll write 5 up there and 650 down at the bottom. We'll subtract the 2. We'll be left with 50. So we'll add another 0. We'll bring it down. Let's do one more. 130 goes into 500. I guess about 3 times. But we'll multiply and check. And we'll end up with 390. And that's pretty close to 500. I wouldn't be able to add another 130 in there without going over 500. So we'll write 3 up there. We'll have 390 at the bottom. And we'll go ahead and stop here. This decimal seems to keep going, which is okay. But remember that at the beginning of our study guide said that we wanted all answers rounded to the hundredths place. So this should give us enough to figure out where we're rounding. Before we can give the answer, though, we must first convert to a percent. So 0.46153 can be converted to a percent by moving the decimal 2 places to the right. This will leave us with 46.153%. But remember that the beginning of our study guide says that we are looking for our answers to be rounded to the hundredths place. Right now, the 5 is sitting in the hundredths place. So we'll look at the number to the right of the 5, which is a 3, and we will determine that we must round down. So in the end, we'll have 46.15%. 60 out of 30 is 46.15%. And we're done. So give me a second to erase some of this work, and we'll move on to number 4. Oh, never mind. We'll move on to number 5. I forgot. I changed some of the numbers around on the problems on the study guide, and it turns out I ended up with no number 4. So we'll jump right to number 5. Alright, number 5. This section is titled Percent of Quantity Part 2, and it says to use proportions. So these are the same kinds of problems that we dealt with before, but this time we'll be using proportions. Number 5 says, what is 90% of 60? So if you'll recall from our lessons earlier this month, we talked about setting up proportions as a part over a whole and setting that equal to a part percentage over a whole percentage. So in these kind of problems, we can take what we know and plug it in. They're always asking for us to find one of these things. And in this particular question, it's asking us what 90% of 60 is. So it's asking us what the part is. It gives us 90%, which is the partial percentage. We know that the whole percentage is always out of 100%. We know that the whole value is 60, that's the most, and we're trying to find part of that. So if we're trying to find the part of 60, that means the top value on the left of our proportions is the one we're going to be looking for. So we'll go ahead and call it x, but you can call it anything you wanted. Again, the whole number is 60. That is the maximum amount of whatever it is we're talking about. Now we'll move on to the other side of the proportion. We know what the partial percentage is because it tells us 90%. And percentages are always out of 100. So the whole percent is 100%. We always know that. Now recall from our lesson when we talked about the butterfly method, we need to take each wing and set them equal to each other. So we'll draw our butterfly wings. Oh, not a great wing. Sorry everyone, this is some new technology, so kind of getting used to it. So we'll take these two wings and we'll multiply them, we'll take the products of them and set them equal to each other. Let me try to redo this and make it a little more clear. Woohoo. Not a good wing. Looks like I made a figure 8. Let's try it again. A little better. So now we'll set these up as products. We'll take our first wing in yellow here. 60 times 90. And we'll set it equal to the other wing, which is x times 100. X times 100 is 100x. We'll set that equal to 60 times 90. And I don't know that off the top of my head, but I can figure it out. 5,400. 5,400. Now we must isolate the x variable. To do that, we'll divide both sides by 100. $100 divided by 100 is just 1, so we can go ahead and cancel those out, and we're left with x. 5,400 divided by 400, or divided by 100 is something I can write out and do the long division. 100 does not go into 5, 100 does not go into 4, but 100 does go into 540. 100 goes into 540 5 times. 5 times 100 is 500, and we'll go ahead and subtract the 2, and we'll be left with 40. Now we'll bring down the last 0, and you'll notice that 100 goes into 400 4 times. 4 times 100 is 400. When I subtract them, I'm left with 0. So the answer is 54. X equals 54. So 90% of 60 is 54. And that's it. Let's move on. What is 14% of 32? Now this is the same process. We're going to set up the proportions. We're looking for the part of 32 that is equal to 14%. So we'll set up our two proportions. We know that this is out of 100% because it always is. We know that the partial percentage is 14. We know that the total number of items, whatever they are, is 32. And we don't know the part. So we'll call the part x, but again, you can call the part whatever you want. Now we'll draw our butterfly wings. You're going to need to practice drawing those because I'm obviously struggling to draw those. There we go. That's a little better. Now we'll draw our other butterfly wing. We'll pull them apart, find the products, and set them equal to each other. So on the first side, we've got x times 100. And we'll set it equal to the product of the other side, which is 32 times 14. X times 100 is just 100x. 32 times 14. Well, I don't know what that is, but I can certainly multiply it out. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is 12. Now we'll cross that out and move to the next place. Put it down my placeholder. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. Now I can just add those up. I get 448. So now I need to isolate the variable. I'm not done yet. So I will divide each side by 100. $100 divided by 100 is just 1, so we'll cross those out and we're left with x. 448 divided by 100 is... Well, we know that 100 doesn't go into 4, and it doesn't go into 44, but it does go into 448. 100 goes into 448 4 times. 4 times 100 is 400, and we'll go ahead and subtract the 2, and we'll be left with 48. We have nothing to bring down, so we'll add a decimal and add a 0, and then we will bring that 0 down. 100 goes into 480 4 times. And if we subtract those, we should be left with 80. We'll add another 0 and bring it down. And now we've got 800. 100 goes into 800 8 times. 8 times 100 is 800, and when we subtract those, we'll be left with 0. And that'll be our answer, 4.48. So 14% of 32 is 4.48. Alright, let's jump to number 7. Number 7 says 14 out of 60 is what as a percentage? So in this one, they're not telling us the percentage. That's the piece that we're going to need to find, but we're still using the same set of proportions. For this one, we know that it'll still be out of 100%, but we don't know what the partial percentage is. So we'll go ahead and call that x, but again, you can call that whatever you want. And it's always out of 100%. We know that 14 is the partial amount of whatever these are, out of 60, which is the total amount. So 60 will go in the denominator because it is our whole number. And 14 will go in the numerator because it is our part. We'll set up our butterfly wings. We'll then take the product of each wing and set them equal to each other. So for the first one, I'll have 60 times x. And we'll set that equal to 14 times 100. Sixty times x is 60x. 100 times 14. I'm not sure, but I can figure it out. Move over to the third place, set my place values. 1 times 4 is 4, 1 times 1 is 1. 100 times 14 is 1,400 or 1,400. So I'm not done yet. I still need to isolate the variable. So we'll divide both sides by 60. On the left side, we have 60 divided by 60, which is just 1, so we'll just bring down the x. 1,400 divided by 60, I'm not quite sure what that is. 1,400 divided by 60. So we'll go ahead and do the long division. 60 doesn't go into 1, 60 does not go into 14, but 60 does go into 140. 60 goes into 140 about 2 times. 2 times 60 is 120. So if we subtract the 2, we end up with 20 left. We'll bring down a 0. 60 goes into 200 3 times. 3 times 60 is 180. If we subtract those, we're left with 20. Well, we don't have another 0 to add, so we'll add a decimal place and add a 0. Bring that 0 down. 60 goes into 200 3 times. 3 times 60 is 180. If we subtract those, we get 20. Add another 0, bring it down. 60 goes into 200 3 times. You'll see that this keeps repeating and repeating. So we're going to end up with a repeating decimal. So our answer will be 23.33. "14 out of 60 is 23.33%. And that's it. Alrighty. Now let's jump to number 8. Here we go. Number 8 says, in 2016, despite losing the presidential election, many news agencies agree that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote with 51% of the vote. If all 3,000 students at Tucson High School voted, how many would have voted for Clinton? Well, we know that 51% of the people voted for Clinton, so we have to figure out what 51% of Tucson High students would look like. So I'll just go ahead and underline some of the important information. We know that 51% of the people voted for Hillary Clinton, and that there are 3,000 students at Tucson High. So 51% is the partial percent, and we know that 100% is the whole percent. So we can go ahead and set up proportions. We don't know how many people we voted. We don't know the partial number, but we do know the total number of students at Tucson High, which is 3,000. How many of them supposedly voted for Clinton, we don't know, but we do know that in total there are 3,000 of them. So now that we've got our proportion set up, we can go ahead and use the butterfly method. Man, I am not good at these butterfly wings. Alright, not so bad. So we'll take the product of each of these wings and set them equal to each other. We'll take 3,000 and multiply that by 51. And we'll set that equal to x times 100. 100 times x is 100x. 3,000 times 51. Oh, let me rewrite that. It's a little wonky looking. We don't know what 3,000 times 51 is, but we can go ahead and figure that out. I'll jump to the last place and put 3 placeholders. 3 times 1 is 3, 3 times 5 is 15. The answer is 153,000. So now we can divide each side by 100 in order to isolate the x value, which is the number of students that voted for Clinton, or would have voted for Clinton. 100 divided by 100 is just x. $153,000 divided by 100 is something I can do doing long division. So my answer is 1,530. Now to bring this back to the question we're talking about, the answer is that 1,530 students would have voted for Hillary Clinton. The reason I wrote students is because that's what it's talking about in the question. So we're not quite done with this one. The second part of this question is how many would have voted for Trump? So the paragraph there doesn't really talk about Trump, but if we know that 51% voted for Hillary Clinton in the popular vote, we can then we can deduce how many voted for Trump. We do this by recognizing the fact that in total there must have been 100% of voters. If 51% voted for Trump, in order to equal 100%, I must find a number that added to 51 equals 100, and I can do this by doing 100 minus 51. That will leave me with 49, so now I know that 49% of people voted for Trump. Now that we have this piece of information, we can set up proportions much like we did in the last one, but use Donald Trump's percentage instead of Hillary Clinton's. We know that the partial percentage is 49, and we know that it's out of 100%. We don't know how many people that equates to, but we do know that we're out of 3,000 people at Tucson High. Remember, it said that right there. And just like before, we'll use the butterfly method to solve this. So we'll set our two wings equal to each other, or the products of them. We have 3,000 times 49 equals x times 100. X times 100 equals 100x. 3,000 multiplied by 49, well, I'm not quite sure what that is off the top of my head, but I can go ahead and write it out. I will skip to the last place value and put down my placeholders. 3 times 9 is 27. 3 times 4 is 12, plus 2 more is 14. So we end up with 147,000 equals 100x. So now we can isolate the variable by dividing both sides by 100. On the right, 100 divided by 100 is just 1, so we'll be left with just x. $147,000 divided by 100, I can go ahead and do the long division for. And our answer is 1,470 students. So we found that we found the number of students that would have voted for both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump if all 3,000 students at Tucson High voted. Well, let's move on to the next question. Number 9 says Chris took his family to dinner last night. The bill was $48.50 before tip. If Chris wanted to leave a 20% tip, how much did he tip and what was his total price? So the first thing we need to do is determine the tip. We do that by multiplying the percentage of tip by the bill. In this case, my tip was 20% and the bill was $48.50. So we'll multiply $48.50 by 20%. But remember that we can't just multiply this percentage, we need to first convert it to a decimal. If we convert 20% to a decimal, it becomes 0.2, or 0.20. We can then multiply 48.50 by 0.20. I'll add a 0 in front of it just so it doesn't get kind of weird looking with a multiplication symbol and a decimal there. Two times 5 is 10, and I'll raise the 1. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 1 more is 17. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 more is 9. Now I need to count the number of decimal places. I've got 2 in each number, which means that my decimal will need to move a total of 4 times to the left. So I'm left with 9.7, or 9.70, $9.70. So that's the number for my tip. My tip was $9.70. Now, in order to figure out my total bill, I'll need to take that tip and add it to my bill. My bill was $48.50. Now I have to add in the amount that I have to pay extra in tip, and that will be my total price. So $48.50 plus our tip, which was 20%, or $9.70, which we found out. And we'll just add those straight up. Make sure and line up our decimal point. We're left with $58.20. And that's it. Let's jump to number 10. Number 10 says Sam is looking to buy a sweet new laptop for gaming. The laptop is on Best Buy, I should say is at Best Buy, sorry, for $1,250. If Arizona has an 8.1% sales tax, how much will Sam pay in taxes, and how much will he pay in total? Tax and tip are pretty much handled the same way, so the first thing we'll need to do is figure out how much we're paying in tax before we can figure out our total. We do that by taking our percent tax and multiplying that by the price, or the amount, which in this case is $1,250. The first thing we need to do is convert our 8.1% into a decimal. Remember that in order to convert it, we have to move it twice to the left. So it starts in the middle there, between the 8 and the 1. If we move it over twice, we end up with 0.081. So 8.1% is converted to 0.081. Now we can multiply that by the cost of the laptop, which in this case is $1,250. Now I've got 2 or 3 decimal places here, which means I need to move my decimal over 3 times. Left with 181.25. So the tax I'm paying on the laptop is $181.25. So this answer has got 3 decimal places. But remember that we're talking about money, so we always need to round up the hundredths place in terms of money because we take our money out to the penny place, or the hundredths place. So my tax is $181.25. Now, in order to figure out the total price that Sam paid for this laptop, I would take the price of the laptop, $1,250, and add that to my tax that I'm required to pay, which we figured out was $181.25. Go ahead and line my decimal places up, fill in the place values that I'm missing, and just add straight down. Make sure to line up my decimal. So the total price, or the total cost that Sam will pay for this laptop after tax, is $1,431.25. And that's it for number 10. Let's jump on to number 11. Number 11 says, Chris just received a coupon to Leslie's Pool Supplies in his email. The coupon is for a 15% discount on his next purchase. Chris is going to use it on a bucket of chlorine tablets, which cost $65. How much is Chris's discount worth, and how much will he pay after the discount is applied? So the first part of the question is asking us how much our discount is worth. This is done much the same way that tax and tip are figured out. We must take the percentage that we're talking about, the partial percentage, in this case 15%, and multiply it by the whole number, or the cost, in this case with $65. That will give us the amount, the partial amount that we're talking about, in this case our discount. So the first thing we need to do is convert 15% to a decimal. We do that by moving the decimal place 2 times to the left. 15% becomes 0.15, or 0.15. Now we can take that and multiply by the cost, which is $65. I have 4 decimal places, so I need to move my decimal place over 4 times, and that leaves you with 9.75. So I know that my discount is worth $9.75. So in tax and tip, we added this to our cost, but in discount, we have to subtract it. We have to take our cost, $65, and subtract our discounted amount, which in this case is $9.75. So first we'll label our discount, which we just found out was $9.75. and we will subtract $9.75 from 65. Make sure we line up our decimals. My answer is 55.25. So for the chlorine tablets, my price after the discount, my new price, will be $55.25 for my new discounted price. So part of my video got lost, but so I'm going to go ahead and jump in the middle of this. Selena purchased a new iPhone. The iPhone cost $750. Selena had an activation tax and a sales tax, which brought her total to $800. How much did she pay in taxes? Hint, use proportions. As you can see on the right there, I've got 800 minus 750, which is 50, which is the dollar amount. But now we're going to use proportions, as you can see, to figure out the percentage. We've got 50 over 750. This 50 is the amount she paid in taxes, and 750 is the price she paid for the phone. We know that it's out of 100%, and we're trying to figure out the percentage she paid in taxes. Now we can take these two butterfly wings, take the products of them, and set them equal to each other. The first one is 750 times x. The second is 50 times 100. And we'll set them equal to each other. 750 times x is just 750x. 50 times 100 is 5,000. Now I have to isolate the x, so I'll divide each side by 750. On the left, 750 divided by 750 just becomes 1, so we're left with x. On the right side, 5,000 divided by 750. $750 doesn't go into 5, it doesn't go into 50, it doesn't go into 500, but it goes into 5,000 approximately, I would guess 3 times. Let's see. Oof, my guess was way off. I don't know what I was thinking there, but we could actually double that. So instead, we'll try 6. So 750 times 6. 6 times 0 is 0. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 7 is 42. Plus 3 more is 45. 4,500 is pretty close to 5,000 without going over. So we'll write the 6 and we'll multiply it out. 6 times 750 is 4,500. When we subtract those, we'll be left with 500. We don't have another decimal to bring down, so instead we will, or another 0 to bring down, so we'll add a decimal and add another 0 and bring that down. And again, we'll get a 6 here because it's 5,000 again. 6 times 750 is 4,500. We're left with 500. We bring down another 0. We've got 5,000, and this is just going to repeat and go on and on and on. So we'll be left with 6.66%. We'll end up rounding this up since it's always 0.66666 on forever. And so Selena will have paid 6.67% in taxes for her new iPhone. And that's the video. Good luck studying.